The palace on Xinor, an alien planet known for its towering spires and iridescent landscapes, was a place of both beauty and power. The air shimmered with the scent of exotic flowers, and the skies were painted with vibrant hues, their colors changing as the twin suns dipped into the horizon. Among all the wonders of the planet, the most remarkable sight was the union between Princess Zaria of Xinor and David Ryder, a human. Their marriage, the joining of two species, one proud and ancient, the other young and fragile, was the talk of the galaxy. Zaria had always viewed her new husband with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. David, despite his outward appearance of strength, was just a man, a creature of Earth with a limited lifespan and fragile bones. As a princess, she had been trained in the arts of diplomacy and warfare, her body honed for both political intrigue and physical combat. She had seen warriors from all across the universe, beings who could bend, metal with their bare hands, and others who could command the very elements with a thought. David was none of those things. When he had first arrived on Xinor, Zaria had dismissed him as harmless, a mere symbol of an alliance between her people and Earth. He was tall, broad-shouldered and handsome, but his hands lacked the grace and precision of a true warrior. His eyes, though kind, held none of the sharpness of those who had seen battle. He was, in her eyes, a pleasant enough companion, affectionate, loyal, and without the arrogance that some of her suitors had shown, but nothing extraordinary. But there was a hidden strength within him, one that Zaria had yet to fully understand. It was a quiet evening in the grand hall of the palace. The light of the two suns was fading, casting a soft glow on the polished marble floors. Zaria stood at the large circular window, watching the sunset over the city below. The wind from the outside brushed against her skin, carrying with it the sweet fragrance of the night-blooming Corin flowers. David walked up behind her, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. His touch was familiar now, comforting. Despite their differences, the bond they shared had grown over time, and though she had often wondered if her people would ever fully accept him, she had long since come to care for him deeply. "You look beautiful," David said, his voice calm but with an edge of emotion she had come to recognize over their years together. She turned to face him, smiling softly. "I'm not the one who needs to look beautiful tonight," she replied, her voice teasing. "The ball is in honor of our alliance. You're the one who will be in the spotlight, David." He chuckled, a rare and deep sound that always made her feel as though she could take on anything in the universe. "I can handle it, as long as you're by my side." Zaria laughed, shaking her head. "You've been handling it for years now. What makes tonight different?" David's smile faltered for a brief moment, and Zaria noticed it. His eyes grew distant, as if lost in thought. She had seen him in countless situations, calm, composed, and without fear, but tonight something was different. She reached up and touched his cheek gently. "David," she said softly, "what's wrong?" He paused, hesitating as though considering whether or not to tell her. Finally, he spoke. "I don't trust them," he said, his voice low but intense. Zaria's brow furrowed. "Who?" "The other delegates," he replied. "The ones from other planets." "They've been watching me." "Studying me?" Zaria frowned, her eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" "You're a symbol of our alliance." "Why would they watch you?" David's face hardened as his eyes darkened. "Because I'm not just a symbol. I'm human, and they don't trust humans." Zaria could see the frustration in his eyes, the tension in his posture. "You're overthinking it," she said, though she wasn't entirely sure. "They respect you. They've been working with you for years now. You've proven yourself time and time again. They understand the importance of this alliance." David took a deep breath, his gaze steady but troubled. "I wish I could believe that. But something about tonight. It feels wrong. There's a danger here that I can't quite put my finger on." Before Zaria could respond, there was a sudden knock at the door. It swung open, revealing a servant standing in the doorway. The servant bowed deeply before speaking. "The guests have arrived, Your Highness," the servant announced. "It is time for the gala." Zaria nodded, looking back at David. "I know you're worried, but we'll face it together. Tonight, we celebrate our alliance." David forced a smile, nodding in return. "Right. Together. The gala hall was magnificent. The room was adorned with sparkling lights and jewels that reflected off the marble floors, creating a mesmerizing spectacle. The air was filled with the soft hum of music, and the delegates from various planets mingled in groups, dressed in elaborate gowns and armor. The alien races Zaria had spent her life learning about now stood before her, each with their own unique culture and history. There were towering reptilian beings, graceful insectoid diplomats, and human representatives from Earth. But it was Zaria's human husband who stood at the center of her thoughts. David, though still clearly uncomfortable, was in his element as they made their entrance. His sharp suit, tailored to fit his broad frame, was a striking contrast to the opulent gowns and ornate armor of the other delegates. Zaria, dressed in her formal gown of shimmering silver, was the picture of elegance beside him. The crowd parted as they entered, their presence commanding attention, but Zaria could see the subtle tension in David's eyes. He was still on edge, still watching the crowd with suspicion, and it was then that she noticed it. There was something in the way the other delegates were looking at him. It wasn't respect. It was calculating. She instinctively took his hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "Don't worry. We've been through this before," she whispered. David gave her a tight-lipped smile but said nothing. He was scanning the room, his eyes darting from one face to another. As they reached the center of the room, Zaria was introduced to various dignitaries. But it wasn't long before the conversation grew tense. The leader of a distant alien species, the Vreth, a tall creature with 4 arms and a chitinous exoskeleton, approached David with a slow, deliberate stride. "Ah, the human," the Vreth said, his voice deep and vibrating. "It is good to finally meet you, Ryder. I must admit I've been curious about you." David remained still, his hand never leaving Zaria's. He nodded politely, but his voice remained calm. "The pleasure is mine." Zaria could sense the undercurrent of tension building. The Vreth's gaze lingered on David for too long, and the subtle dismissiveness in his words made Zaria's instincts flare. "You see, we've heard rumors about the strength of the human race," the Vreth continued. "But I wonder if they are exaggerated." David's eyes darkened, but he said nothing. Zaria could see the conflict within him. He wanted to respond, wanted to defend his people, but she could tell he was restraining himself, knowing the consequences of such an outburst. The Vreth had been known for provoking people, testing their limits. "Perhaps we should discuss this later," Zaria interjected smoothly, placing her hand on David's arm, her voice firm but polite. "The evening is for celebration, not conflict." The Vreth sneered slightly but bowed, stepping away with a final unsettling glance at David. David turned to Zaria, his jaw tight. "That wasn't a challenge." Zaria watched him closely. She knew David's strength. He had been trained as a soldier before their marriage, but it was his calm demeanor that had always impressed her. Yet she saw now the restraint in his eyes. The Vreth had pushed him too far, but David wasn't taking the bait. Not yet, but Zaria's curiosity piqued, and her suspicions grew. She had underestimated how much David had learned from his years as her consort. And then, the unexpected happened. The Vreth's words, those taunts, seemed to break David's calm demeanor. With a flash of speed that surprised even Zaria, David's hand shot out and grabbed the Vreth's wrist, twisting it with a crack that echoed through the room. In one swift motion, David drew a sword, a gleaming weapon that had been hidden beneath his suit. The room fell silent. The Vreth, caught off guard, struggled briefly, but was powerless against the sheer force of David's grip. The shock on the faces of the delegates was palpable. The air was thick with tension as David stood there, his sword at the Vreth's throat, his eyes locked with the aliens. Zaria, stunned by the sudden shift, felt her heart race. "David, stop!" she commanded, her voice sharp with a mixture of fear and authority. David's gaze flicked to her, his expression hard and unyielding. For a brief moment he seemed like a different man, one Zaria had never seen before. It wasn't the calm, composed human who had won her affection. It was a warrior, ready to defend himself, his people, and his honor. With a final, deliberate motion, David released the Vreth's wrist and stepped back. The Vreth stood, glaring but clearly shaken by the unexpected threat. Zaria stood frozen, her mind racing. She had thought David harmless, a diplomat in a world of warriors. But she had just witnessed a side of him she hadn't known existed. David sheathed his sword, his gaze never leaving the Vreth. "If you insult me or my people again," he said quietly, "you will regret it." The room remained silent for what felt like an eternity. But in that silence, something had shifted. Zarya had learned that, while David might be a symbol of peace, he was also far more dangerous than she had ever imagined.